Hello, and welcome back to another coffee conversation. Christine, do you want to put us on
Yes,
gallery view so they can see both of us?
absolutely. Okay. I'm super excited that we're coming on for this topic. I'm really excited. I actually have coffee this morning. I
I
mean, I
do
drink
not. I have water in my coffee cup. I feel like an imposter, but you gotta do what
hey,
you
but
gotta
you
do.
know what? You still got the coffee cup, and that's one step ahead of me. I'm still waiting to move, you guys. I cannot wait to move into my new place so I can buy all of our merch because I'm
I'm
not.
I'm like a walking advertisement today. I have our shirt, I have our cup.
I
It
love it.
totally wasn't planned.
I love it. I love it so much. I'm so close to moving and I'm just like, I can't get any new stuff. I'm not packing it to one more place. And so I'm really close. And then I'm gonna look like Izzy and I'll have the shirt and
Yeah,
mug.
and we'll match and it'll be great.
I love it. I love it so much. So Izzy, why don't you tell us what are we jamming on today?
Yes, so I am super excited for this particular topic. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, is talking about how can we use our intuition in our Reiki practice. And the reason we're kind of having this conversation is we had so many people ask. We did a how do you use your intuition webinar a while back, and there were so many people who were so excited about the idea of actually being able to connect to their intuition. And yet there were also so many comments about how it's hard to carry that understanding and carry that connection forward into your Reiki practice. And a lot of it, I think, comes from the fact that when we're beginning Reiki students, we're taught all of these frameworks and structures and hand positions and timers and things like that that you're supposed to do. And, it was really funny. I was looking through our reviews on our podcast and we had somebody comment something along the lines of stop being afraid of the 21 days. And I'm like, this is why we have these conversations, because we're not afraid of the structures. We're not saying to not use the structures. We're saying that when we can use them, as long as they are a learning tool, then they are incredibly effective. But the moment they start to hold us back and the moment they start to disconnect us from the Reiki energy rather than connecting us deeper into it, that's when we're looking at, well, then what's the next step? What comes after that when you hit that point in your Reiki practice where you feel like you have kind of built yourself this box that you didn't even know was there and you don't know how to get out of, but you know that you feel stuck? Because I think that's a point that every Reiki practitioner gets to, is this feeling of there's something else, but I don't know what it is, and I'm afraid to go explore that. And that's really why Reiki Cafe University is here, is to give you a space where you can explore what's beyond the box, what's on the other side of these structures and frameworks that can be incredibly helpful and also can hold you back. And so that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Like anything that's breaking the box, I'm all for. Not that, and like as you said, it's not that the box is bad. It's really good, like training wheels. It's really good to start your practice, like have the framework and know that spending an hour to 2 hours doing a self practice every day is very unrealistic for most practitioners. Like as much as I want to say yeah, I do an hour every day, I'm like, no, it's probably somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes a day while I'm going to sleep. And I know when it's like, all right, I'm good. I feel complete. And I'm just going to let my guides finish out this work because I know they're here and they're Reiki guides. And they can do it while I sleep. So I gotta just pass the baton, but that is so outside the box. And that's what we're talking about today. We really want to go, here's the framework, and look at all the other places that we can explore by using our intuition. So it's the exploration, it's the curiosity, it's the adventure of going, what's the truth and alignment for me? Let's make it unique to me. Can we start there, please?
Yes. And I think that's the thing, is there are so many Reiki practitioners that I talk to when they start this journey of how does my intuition show up for me in my practice, that have a sense of moral right and wrong about following these frameworks. And that is the biggest thing that holds people back, is this feeling that if I'm not doing self-Reiki for an hour or two every day, if I'm not following the hand structures in a session, if I'm not doing the traditional meditations, then I'm doing something wrong. Then I am somehow a quote unquote bad Reiki practitioner, or I can't call myself an actual Reiki practitioner, or other Reiki practitioners will judge me, or all of these kinds of thoughts. And that's where people get stuck, because it has become this moral issue of, if you follow the frameworks, then you're a quote unquote good Reiki practitioner because you're following the rules. But are you actually a good practitioner? And I think that's where we come back to is, can we look at what it means to be a good Reiki practitioner? Can we go to something like the Reiki principles, where we're talking about doing our work honestly, where we're talking about being kind to every living being, where we're talking about not worrying, and hold those up against our experiences of holding on to the frameworks? And again, sometimes those things like hand positions, like structure of a self-Reiki session, like holding each hand position for 3 minutes, sometimes that is incredibly helpful. And sometimes when we hold those up against the Reiki principles, we can see that trying to draw the symbol perfectly every time I use it is actually causing me to worry. And so using that framework is actually causing me to live against the Reiki principles, or feeling like I'm a fraud for not doing self-Reiki for an hour is causing me to worry or to not be kind to others because I'm feeling wounded in myself. And so there's this balancing act that has to happen when we're talking about when is it time to bring your intuition into your Reiki practice, because a lot of practitioners, especially when they first start out, they need that structure. They need that framework, right? I always think of bringing it back to the chakras. We need our root chakra, right? We need a strong, solid foundation. And honestly, we need to give our minds a framework that it can understand. Because if you are just like, here's this universal energy, have fun, like your brain doesn't know what to do with that. There's nothing there. And so giving it these structures and frameworks, in my opinion, in my practice, is more like a chew toy that you give the mind so that you can come into connection with Reiki instead of worrying about it. And so they can be incredibly helpful. But that moment when, instead of easing your worries about your practice, they start to add to your worries about your practice, that's when it's time to look at, okay, what's more important to me, to follow these rules of how a practice is supposed to look, or to follow my own inner knowing that there's something beyond this that I can explore. And there's no right answer for everybody, right? We're not sitting here saying that you shouldn't do the hand positions or that you should only do the hand positions or any of it. We're not saying any of that. We're saying that this is an opportunity to come within yourself and really look at what is best for you. What is Reiki guiding you toward? And can you take away the judgments of your mind and really look at, am I living in alignment with those Reiki principles? Are these frameworks adding to my practice, or are they taking away from? Because when we can take that really close, honest look at our practice, that's when we start to get answers to these questions that we didn't even know we had.
I think it all comes down to this premises that here at the ReikiCafe University, we strongly believe, and that's that we all have our true wisdom from within us. We have the knowledge, the wisdom, the answers within us. It's not going to be found outside of us. And how can we connect with our internal truth, our eternal alignment, our eternal knowing in our intuition, in our spiritual gifts, in our experience, that we can judge for ourselves. And one of the things, as you were talking, this memory of me being on Mount Kurama in Japan, you know, here I am like at the home, the birthplace of Reiki. And I have this Reiki monk who's like, be careful. And I just wanted to respond, just for today, don't worry. And so I want to tell you this story. I'm going to interject this story quickly, that my dad and I, we have very much a strong psychic ability in our family overall. Like, it's through the generations. Like, I can go back generation to generation, go, this is where all of my spiritual gifts come from. And my dad was explaining to Hakutan Sensei how he was feeling the vortex of Mount Karama, and he could feel the energy, and he was asking these questions about the vortex because he could feel it. Obviously, very clairsentient, right? Like that is his gift. And they were having this conversation. I was just trying to be an observer. Like I'm just hanging out with my dad. Like, and then my dad was like, but she can see it. I'm like, oh, you gave me away. Like I was not expecting to have this conversation on Mount Karama. And my dad was just basically like explaining how I can see things and I can feel things and I can hear things and I can do all of these things. And he's hyping me up. And it was very clear that that is not like acceptable in the most traditional Reiki. Like I needed to fit in the box or else be careful. And I'm just like, just for today, don't worry. Like I'm going to go, who am I not to be my authentic self? Who am I to shove my experience, my internal wisdom, my generations, my ancestors? Who am I to turn that all off so that I can fit into the box? And so even when I had someone of high esteem who's very well respected in the Reiki community tell me, be careful, and I can go, I know what's true for me. And just because he doesn't have the gifts, like he was very well admitting, like, I don't have those kind of spiritual gifts. I don't see things, I don't hear things, I don't, I just do the practice. Like, and he thinks that that is what it should look like. And that's okay for him because that's his authentic truth. But I'm going to stand in mine and my authentic truth and my ancestors' powers and the love and grace that has been given and bestowed to me as a God's gift, right? I'm going to say yes to that, and I'm not going to worry about it. And I don't necessarily need to have an argument or like a debate with someone who is very comfortable living inside the box, right? So this is kind of like, I'm sharing this story because I want you to also go, what is my truth? Who am I? How do I express myself? And am I denying a part of who I am by fitting into the box?
Mm. Yeah. And also notice, as you're asking those questions, what feelings are coming up about that? Because that idea of this is my truth and I'm going to follow that can be really triggering for a lot of people. And so noticing what emotions are coming up when you are asking these questions. I was having a fascinating conversation with someone the other day about the relativity of truth. And I think it's so important in conversations like this because the way that I explain it and I teach it to all of our students is there's capital T truth and there's lowercase t truth. Okay. And so capital T truth is, to use a metaphor here or an analogy, it is Reiki. The energy of Reiki, not the practice, but the energy of Reiki is that capital T truth. It is that divine, all that is loving energy that flows through all things. The lowercase t truth is then how we, as human spiritual beings, are interpreting that capital T truth. Because when we're talking about a capital T truth, we're talking about an experience. We're talking about something that is not able to be formulated in words, right? You can attempt to describe Reiki, but there's no way to actually give someone the experience of Reiki by telling them what it is. It's not possible. But because we are human beings, because we are a language-based species, we have to attempt to take these larger universal realities and bring them to a level that our minds can understand, oftentimes through our words. And how that gets presented is what I call lowercase t truth. And another way of thinking about this is if you think about light shining through a prism, that one light beam is pure and true and whole. And when it goes through the prism, thousands of other colors come out. And we as human beings are the prism. So we have these capital T truths that are flowing through us, and yet they're going to be reflected and refracted through our human selves in many, many different ways. And this is where you get things like so many different world religions that are all trying to point to the same thing, and yet are using vastly different language in order to explain it, because we are all trying to explain this capital T truth with our own personal lowercase t truth. There's a Buddhist saying about the hand pointing at the moon that talks about something similar. So if you're in the Buddhist way of thinking, then you understand. But it's this idea of Reiki is Reiki is Reiki is Reiki, the energy of it. How it chooses to come through us and refract through the prism of our consciousness, our experience, is going to be different for every person. And so that might change, right? And that's the other thing, is that because we as humans are operating with this lowercase t truth, because quite frankly, our minds aren't capable of comprehending a capital T truth. There's a reason we're human. If we were meant to have a knowing and complete experience of capital T truths, then we would have stayed as spiritual beings. But part of being here is knowing that there will always be an absence of the totality of information, and getting comfortable with that, because that's what allows us to grow and explore, is getting curious about what am I missing, what's new today, etc. And so when we're using this with Reiki, we can really look at Reiki as an energy is Reiki, but it's going to come through every single person, every single practitioner in different ways. And so why are we trying to pretend that the Reiki energy that flows through us, through our prism, is blue when it's actually red? You know what I'm saying? It's this question of, at what point did we decide that we weren't allowed to have a unique personal experience of energy? At what point were we told that if we're not experiencing or doing it this particular way, that we're wrong? And that's really, I think, the point of Christine's story, is that for this man on Mount Karama, he was practicing Reiki in his own way. For example, saying that his Reiki came through him as red, and Christine's over here with her Reiki coming through her as blue, and is like, yes, I can see that. I can see your energy. I can understand where you're coming from. I know that that is what is true for you. And yet, at the same time, not in spite of, not you're wrong, I'm right, but at the same time, Reiki is refracting through me, through my vessel, through my being as blue energy, for example. And this is my truth. And I am called by the Reiki energy that's flowing through me to honor that and to express that and to follow that and see what it looks like for me in each moment, knowing that tomorrow I could wake up and it could be green. And that's another box, is not letting yourself think that it's always going to be the same, because it's not, right?
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful explanation of going, I can honor however it shows up today, and tomorrow, or for a specific client, it might refract a different way. Like the actual practice of Reiki and how it shows up from client to client, so fascinating to me, right? Like I'll have one client where I'm totally silent in my brain. I'm not hearing any messages, but my hands are just knowing exactly where to go. I'm feeling all the things. I'm like energetically, intuitively moving that energy through. And then the next client, I'm like, well, I could just stay in this one spot the whole time and it doesn't matter, because I'm getting messages for her. And I feel guided to do a guided visualization for her because the imagery is showing up. So it's so interesting when you're open to being that refractor of however the energy wants to show up for whatever is going to be for the greatest and highest good of your clients, of how the energy will flow. And so I love being in that place. And this is why I love sharing with students and love helping clients, is that my job is just to be available, just to be that prism of however Reiki wants to show up. And if I can be in that centered and aligned place and just be open, I love that feeling. I think if you're practicing Reiki, you know what that feeling feels like. It feels so freaking good just to be like, I'm here now. I'm here now. All the precepts and principles are like right there with you. And it's just flowing. It's just happening. And it feels good for the practitioner. And the clients are getting exactly what they need. And it's no two sessions ever feel the same. And so how could you possibly get bored in a Reiki practice? I think that's like, if you're in alignment, if you're a perfect prism for whatever the Reiki, how it wants to shine through, how could you get bored? When I have like, I read this book that was really, it was all called Reiki and Meditation or something basic like that. And the publisher sent it to me because they wanted to be on the podcast. And I read it, and it was this like, their clientele that they were speaking to was a Reiki practitioner who was getting bored in practice. I was like, how is that possible? Like, I don't understand. I don't think it works that way. I feel like if you are doing your self-healing, if you're doing your work, and maybe if you're getting bored, that's a reflection of like, oh, I need to work on me, perhaps, because it shows up so beautiful and vastly different from client to client. And, or maybe like, I'm just throwing out some ideas because I don't know if I have necessarily a point, but I could see maybe having a very Eastern practice. Could that be boring if you're stuck?
Well, I think I'm wondering if being boring could be a sign that you're keeping yourself in a box or a framework that's not serving you anymore, because I'm thinking of this conversation is reminding me of human design. Everybody has a I forget what it's called. It's something like your misalignment type, but it's the emotion that you experience when you're out of alignment. And for me, mine is frustration, but I think boredom is one of them. And so I'm wondering if it could be, if you're bored in your Reiki practice, has your practice become black and white instead of colored in? Like, are you just doing this and this and this because it's what you've been told to do? Or are you saying, well, what if I try this? Or what if I let the energy guide me? Or what if today was something different?
Yeah, right. Like, I had a apprentice at one point in my brick and mortar practice, and she was with me for well over 6 months. And she was like, I want to move my arms. I'm like, okay, so do it. Like, I couldn't have, I mean, I have always been like, don't let the Reiki restrict you. That's not Reiki if it's restricting you. It should be expansive. And so she's over here pinwheeling her arms and moving everywhere. And I was like, and how did that feel for you? She's like, it felt really good. I go, well, you know how it felt for me as you practiced on me. Like, I felt like you unlocked years of scar tissue and jaw tension in my mouth, and you were 5 feet away pinwheeling your arms. Who am I to say that you have to do it a certain way and you have to be hands-on? You have like it. I think this is one of those topics that I get really fired up about, because I'm like, it can look in so many different ways, and the way nature moves, it's like trying to put nature into a box. It's not going to thrive. We try to put nature into a box. It wants to move and expand and flow.
Yeah. And I think that's where it comes back to for me, is really looking at, once we understand the power that can happen when we let ourselves step outside the box, or when we understand that it's not a moral issue about if you are a good Reiki practitioner or not, then it becomes this question of, well, what's holding us back? Why, if we know this, if we felt the call, if we hear stories like this one, where we know that our intuition can be incredibly powerful in our practice, then what's holding us back? And I would say 9 times out of 10, what holds us back is our own minds. And the way that I explain this is, when you look at Reiki from a cultural perspective, when you look at what it was really created to be, if you go back and read, for example, Mikao Usui's original notebooks, there were no hand positions, there were no symbols, there were not levels. These things did not exist. However, as they were added in over time, it was also a reflection of the culture in which they were cultivated, because the Japanese culture is one of ritual and sacred intention and ceremony and tradition. That is just their culture. It is steeped in those things. And so, of course, this most holy energy that was coming through into their culture at the time would be celebrated and revered by introducing all of these things, like hand positions, like ceremonies, like you must do this, this, and this, because that was how they honored the things that were sacred to them. And so when we're looking at this, there is also this understanding of, again, going back to capital T truth versus lowercase t truth. The Reiki, as it came through Mikao Usui, was the capital T truth. How we then chose to interpret it, particularly in those early years when Reiki was becoming what we know it to be today, that's when it started to take on this element of lowercase t truth, of how we were then interpreting it, how we were celebrating it, how we were integrating it into our daily lives. And another way of looking at this, and I have a point here, I promise. Another way of looking at this is if we go and we look at, if we equate capital T truth with soul or intuition and lowercase t truth with our mind, or some people call it our ego. Because our souls and our intuitions have the capacity to understand that capital T truth. When we start bringing it into words and language and trying to understand it, that's when we bring it to the level of the mind. And so if we think about it that way, it's really clear that these hand positions and these structures that we put around Reiki are really just products of our own minds. Particularly given that, again, if you go back and look at Mikao Usui's original journals, these frameworks weren't there. It's not like they were yes, the symbols were, but how we were taught to use them in an exact way was not. The levels were not. The hand positions were not. They were added in later. And so we can really look at this moment where Reiki transitioned from this pure energy into this combination of energy and then how we interact with it in our mind. And so it becomes really clear that these frameworks are products of our mind and are products of us trying to understand Reiki energy. And so when we think about it like that, of course, the thing that's going to hold us back the most is going to be our minds, because we're going to start worrying about, well, if I take away these frameworks that encourage my mind, that support my mind, that allow my mind to feel comfortable in my practice, if I start to question those, if I start to let those go, what's going to happen? And that's really where it comes down to, is there's fear underneath that. There's fear of being a bad practitioner. There's fear of something going wrong. There's fear of being wrong, in that you would feel guilty about it, or shame, right? There's fear of that judgment from others. And when we do that, when we allow our minds to hold on to those feelings, of course, we're going to hold ourselves back. And so for me, I always start this idea of making a change, or of bringing our intuition into our practice, of, can we find a way to engage your mind so that it no longer feels fear? And what I mean by this is, can we look at how the mind functions and use that to our advantage? Because we know that our mind loves frameworks. We know it loves its boxes. It loves its limits. It loves its boundaries. That's how it feels safe. So can we give it a safe space in which to explore something new? And one of my favorite ways of doing this is adding just to anything that we do. So if you are curious about trying to use your Reiki intuition in your Reiki practice, then telling your mind, it's just this one time. Just for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to try and use my intuition just for today. Sound familiar? There's a reason that the Reiki principles are just for today, because it gives the mind this framework to feel like it is still in control. Because now, instead of saying, bye mind, have fun, I'm going to listen to my intuition for an infinite amount of time, and it's like, oh my gosh, now you're saying, the mind can say, I'm letting you use your intuition for a day. It still feels like it has the control. And so it's going to open up enough that you can try something new and see if it works. And when those anxieties and when those fears come in about, what if it doesn't work? What if something goes wrong? What if whatever? Can you switch that to even if? Even if it goes wrong, it's okay. Even if it doesn't go the way I want it to, it's okay. Even if somebody tells me I'm wrong, it's okay. And switching those thoughts can be so powerful, because not only does it, again, allow the mind to feel like it has enough control to let you try something new, but it also exposes how flimsy those fears we have are in the first place.
Yeah. And I love that as a reminder. If Reiki is the foundation of everything that we're doing, we're just doing Reiki in a different way. Reiki is going to keep it safe. Reiki is this beautiful, universal love and light energy that if we employ Reiki, it's going to help us be in alignment, be safe. And so, like, for example, when I do shamanic Reiki, Reiki is still the foundation of everything. I'm not doing a cord cutting. I'm not doing a soul retrieval. I'm not doing just those things alone. Reiki is the foundation of the practice. And when Reiki is the foundation of the practice, it's going to keep things safe. So I always come back to that. Like, we're doing Reiki. It's not like we're pivoting 180 degrees and doing some other kind of practice where Reiki is not even existent in. We're talking about Reiki here. And so when we are employing Reiki as a foundation to do our intuition work, it's going to, in and of itself, keep the situation safe and alignment and in flow. And if you can trust your Reiki guides and your support team and your ancestors and all of those entities that are rooting for you, when we focus on that, when we focus on, I'm not alone in this, in my practice. And I think that is also a very Western perspective after coming back from Japan, like me knowing that I have a spirit team of celestials, of power animals, of Reiki guides. Like, that is a very Western perspective. And perhaps it's because I grew up Catholic. Like, of course I've got people around me, right? Like, of course there's saints that are like, you can do this. I'm gonna help you. Like, maybe that was the culture I was raised in. And I'm grateful for it. I'm absolutely grateful for it, to know that I am never alone. I won't die alone. Like, I know as part of who I am, that I always have support. I always have helpers. I have angels that are like, yes, and let me help you, show you the way. And let's listen to that intuition. Let's listen to those nudges. When I get the hit of like, call that person or message that person, like, there's a reason to it, because they're divinely helping me orchestrate living in this 3D reality of wearing this human suit to help raise the consciousness of the earth, to help do my divine mission, whatever is unique for me. And we want to hold a space for you to do the same for you.
Yes. And so then it becomes looking at, how does our intuition show up in our practice? Because that's the next thing. Again, if our mind is going to want examples, it's going to want to know, if I let go for 5 minutes, what's it going to look like? What's going to happen? And this is part of where it comes back to conversations we've had in the past about knowing your spiritual gift and knowing how energy shows up for you, because it's going to be different for everyone. But a lot of times when people decide to step out of the box of their mind in their practice, one of the very first things they notice shifts is their relationship with the symbols and their relationship with the hand positions. Those are often, I find, the first two things that get shifted. And so with the symbols, it might become, we're told this almost prescriptive way of looking at the symbols. Like, we use Hanshizei Shonen for distance. We use Seiheki for emotions. We use Chokurei as the power symbol, and it activates all the other ones. Like, we're taught these very specific situations that we're quote unquote supposed to use specific symbols. And often when you open up to intuition, you'll find that you start to use and interact with the symbols in a very different way. They are no longer prescriptive, meaning that we see a certain situation and we know, oh, this symbol is needed for this kind of thing. They almost become, in a way, descriptive of, they're looking at, this is an explanation, this is blending with this person's experience, and I'm feeling called to use this particular symbol, even if it doesn't make sense for what we were taught that symbol, quote unquote, should look like. And so I know Christine and I both don't use the symbols a lot in our practice anymore, and they come up, we use them when we feel called to, but it's no longer a necessary portion of our practices. It no longer feels like our Reiki session was not successful if we did not use a symbol. And I think that is also another thing to look at, is understanding that a lot of the reason that the symbols are so powerful is because of the intention that we put behind them. At the end of the day, and people are going to fight me on this, I know, but at the end of the day, the symbols are just a bunch of lines and squiggles. They really are. And I know that that's probably not what some people want to hear, but I'm going to say it because it's true. a lot of these symbols, not the ones that use the Japanese kanji, but like, for example, chokurei. My 8-year-old sister could have drawn that just because it looks like a tornado, and she wouldn't know, right? And so, yes, there is that cultural language background of something like Kanshization that does use the particular kanji, but then we have to look at what are the kanji in the first place. They are also a collection of lines and squiggles that we have decided have meaning. And that's really what all language is, right? If we want to get into that conversation, is everything we say, everything we use, all of our languages, whether it's English or Japanese or anything in between, are at a very basic level made up. We have decided that they mean something. And it's the same thing with the Reiki symbols. They are these collections of shapes and lines that we have decided mean something. And in our decision to allow them to have power, to allow them to have meaning, they are then imbued with that power and with that meaning because of our intention, right? Like I'm actually wearing a shirt right now that says, where awareness goes, energy flows. And it's so true, because when we put our intention behind something, that is what gives it power. And so when we're looking at the symbols, also realizing that, yes, again, there is a cultural language background for why the symbols are the way they are and all of that beautiful detail. And also, they are that way, they have that detail because we decided that they did, because we put our intention in that place. And so when we start looking at the symbols, not as what does this one mean in a universal sense, but how is it showing up today? What is its intention today? What energy is it bringing for this particular session, for this particular client? Then our relationship with the symbols really starts to switch, because it's no longer a one size fits all situation.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that when you're totally in flow with Reiki, it feels amazing, and the logical mind is not there. It's not invited to the party. Everything is just flowing. And so if you do get a symbol pop up in your awareness, it's there for a reason, right? And so you're in a state of zero, like you're a blank canvas. There's nothing there. And so when some kind of spark or color or something shows up on that blank canvas, it's there for a reason. And so you have to know and be able to recognize when you're at zero, at that blank canvas, when it's absolutely blank, so that you can recognize when something pops in. And when you're here, when you're in that alignment, when you're in that flow of the energy and holding on to, I'm a blank canvas. And this is where, I think the Eastern practitioners, with all their study of meditation, it's easier perhaps to get to that blank canvas. But then instead of going, no, like waving off those intuitional hits, what we're suggesting is like, yes, get to that zero state, get to that blank canvas. And then when something pops forward, go, that was there for a reason. Let me pay attention to that. How can I listen to that, whatever is showing up, whether it's moved to a specific body part or a song or whatever it may be. You're starting from the blank. And that can be a really beautiful thing. And how we get to that state, we have a lot of tips and tricks. Like, there's a lot of different ways, but you need to figure out what works for you. Like for us, Izzy and I talk all the time about taking some nice deep breaths. When I go into Gasho and I take my breaths, I can get into that state of flow and just let go. And you have to go back to it again and again and again. It's not like a light switch that stays on super easy, because our mind is so active in this human world that to know how to be quiet for more than 60 seconds or 2 minutes can be difficult. Like it's about developing that muscle of going back to zero, going back to that blank canvas of going, I am just honoring my pure intentional of healing. And that's all there is for this moment. And going back to it again and again. And what helps you get there? Is it saying the precepts? Is it Gasho? Is it breath work? Is it, tapping? Like whatever works for you, that's where we want to get. We want to get you to the state of right? And then when you're there, then you know that things that pop forward are in authenticity. It's not coming from the mind. So that's the work. That's the work that we need to get to. And whether you use traditional Reiki practices to help you get there, or you use yoga, or you use EFT tapping, or you use like whatever, it's all good. Have Reiki be the foundation.
Right. And one of the most common questions we get, I love having this conversation with our students, because one of the most common questions we get is, how do I know I'm not just making it up? And it's such a good question, because there are times where when we're working on a client, say, and we're like, I really feel like my hands need to be on this client's liver. The mind is immediately going to come in and be like, well, why his liver? He doesn't have liver problems. Like, and you're going to be like, well, what if I just made it up? What if I was just trying to feel like my intuition was in control and I just made up this thing? And there's two ways that I explore this question with our students. Is first looking at, even if you made it up, why would that be a problem? And students usually have to pause and think about the problem for a minute, because it really is this question of, why are we saying that something made up is less valuable than something we thought of with our mind? Because our thoughts are made up. A lot of our experiences are made up. Like, where's the line between something that you've thought of, or, a premeditated thought, and an active imagination that just pops in? And where have we decided that an active imagination is not a spiritual thing? Where have we decided that if we imagine it, it's wrong? There are some really interesting questions. Yes, please.
Right. Well, I think that's it. Like one of my mentors, and I love her. She says that spirit works through your imagination. And I think I love that so much, when you can be at this plate of zero and accept our femininity and our creativity, because that's where that imagination is coming from. And our Western culture says, no, don't do that. That's not valid. Our creativity is not valid. Our imagination is not valid. And that's where I'm like, whoa, pause, wait, can we honor our authentic selves again and again and again, right? Like, and so when she says divine communicates you through your imagination, allow it to flow. That's that first step, that trusting, that showing up for you is the first step of learning how to shamanic journey. And until we can trust that deep sense of knowing that we're not going to dismiss our authentic connection with divine, that's always the hardest part. There will be students who come into shamanic Reiki practitioner training, and it may take weeks for them to do their first journey. And we try and try again, and we keep going back to this point of allowing that surrender of our egos, the surrendering of our logical mind, surrendering to the safe container that Reiki provides, so that the imagination can start to flow and develop and open to speak to us in a non-linear format. Right? Yeah.
Yes. And so when we're talking about this, thinking about, and this is what I usually say to students that kind of helps break them out of this thought pattern, is we are constantly making things up as human beings, right? I mean, all of life, all of our decisions, we are constantly making up, because that's part of the act of being in the present. We can't know the future. We can't know what's coming next, right? I mean, science is constantly changing, and we like to pretend that those are facts, right? We are constantly making stuff up. And so for me, I would so much rather live in a world that is magical, where energy is healing, where our physical ailments are not death sentences, but simply opportunities to look inwards and see what's going on a deeper level, where I have a spirit team who is guiding me and supporting me, where I'm never alone, where my intuition truly does know the answers to me. I would so much rather live in that world than a world where there is a right and a wrong, where I'm a terrible Reiki practitioner if I don't do it this exact way, where I am alone in my practice and I can cause harm, and all of these fear-based things. And when we can open ourselves up to that, and this understanding that we are making everything up, no matter if we're making it up in a positive way or if we're making it up in a fearful way, we're always making it up. And so would you rather live in a world where magic exists or where it doesn't? And only you can know the answer to that question. But when we ask that question, that's often where students break through that barrier of realizing that there is no wrong answer. There is no rule. There is no you have to do it this way, because at some point those rules were also made up. Like
well, and I think this is where it comes in. Like, we are the creators of our reality. We dream our dream of life, whether that is in the nighttime space or that we are waking space. This is a very shamanic point, like view of the world. Like, everything that's happening in our 3D reality, we're still the creators of it. Our experiences of that and the reflection, like, it's like, what lens are we looking through? Like, I obviously have a very like the cup is half full, perspective. But when you ask me about like interest rates and mortgages and like, right, like, I'm also human, right? And so I think that's why I love Reiki so much, because it pulls me into the half full glass energy, right? I know that in this space, when I see a hawk out my window or there's a deer walking through my yard, it's there for a reason and purpose, right? And so I want to live in that space. I want to live in that world. And that's what I get to choose to do. I can walk through the world as a pessimist and worried about doomsday coming and alien invasions or whatever it is. And also get to go, I can come back to my zero and I can trust my intuition. And the greatest impact I can make for myself and in my world is to be there. What is going to help me come there so that I can trust my intuition, so I can trust my guides, because if I can trust them, they'll show me the way out. They'll lay the gold, like the yellow brick road. Those were used, traditionally, like in the actual text, they're a golden brick road. It's a path that's laid before you. And yes, there's some lessons and learnings along the way and some friends that come along, but it's still meant for you to walk it and to trust, like, I don't know where it's going. I don't know how long it's going to take for me to get there, but I trust that I'm going the right direction.
Yeah. And we have so many resources on how to connect with your intuition and how to use your intuition and all of these things. But if you only take away one thing from today's conversation, it's really this idea of, can you give yourself permission to step outside the box? Can you give yourself permission to, just for today, not worry, to just for today, step outside that box and see what happens, to know that even if it doesn't go the way you want it to, that's okay. Even if it doesn't feel different, that's okay. Keep going. Can you give yourself that space to be comfortable playing with your intuition, even if it feels like you're making it up? Can you give yourself this space to let go of the expectations of how it's supposed to look and start thinking about how it could look? Not because it's better that way, not because you have to, not because Christine and Izzy practice that way, but purely because you have felt that knowing in yourself and you want to honor it and see what it has to say. If that's the only thing that you take away from today's conversation, then Christine and I have done our jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And so know this, we've got a couple amazing opportunities in the Reiki Cafe community, our Facebook group, going on right now. we have our 14-day Reiki reawakening. And I want to tell you how this got started, because I think the history of it will help you guys go, oh, I can see where she's at. So when I started Reiki Cafe Community, our Facebook group, that was like 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years, 2016. And when I built the group, it was mainly to hold me accountable. I needed to hold myself accountable for my daily Reiki practice. I needed to hold myself accountable to learn about the chakras. I wanted to hold myself accountable for my own personal Reiki practice. And I wanted a safe space for my students to do the same. Who knew that it was going to grow beyond my students and like be this whole international thing? That wasn't necessarily the original intention. I wanted to have a safe space for any and all students to come together to receive support. And so one of the things that I created right away was my 21-day Reiki challenge. And the 21 days was to match this idea that we needed to have a 21-day cleansing process after you get your Reiki level 1. And how many times it's so hard for many of us to do 21 days solid. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do an online Reiki challenge and we're going to do it for 21 days. And that's how it started. Is like, I wanted to give support to my students and hold myself accountable, because I always was slipping. I was like, crap, I haven't done Reiki in 2 days, or wherever I was, right? Like, and so I wanted to have a community that was going to hold me accountable and I was going to hold them accountable, and this was going to be a good thing. And so I developed these programs, and I would do them like every quarter. And I wanted to have the Reiki reawakening be a place of like, and we're coming back to our starting point. We're coming back and we're doing it again, and we're doing it again, because there's not a bad time to do Reiki, right? So I did that for a long time, and it came down to, okay, 21 days is too long. People are starting to fall off. Let's make it 2 weeks. So it became 14 days. If we can get people in a new habit within 14 days and give them some really outside the box ideas and tips and tricks, how to Reiki your shoes, how to do Reiki when you sleep, how do you Reiki your food, like how do you do it automatically where it becomes part of your lifestyle, that's going to be super empowering, because then we can totally step outside the box and going, it doesn't have to look like a session. It can be like, through my eyes, from the moment I wake up, I see through the Reiki lens, and Reiki is here now and all around me, and it's part of my life. And so we developed this Reiki 14-day Reiki reawakening. So it's for people who are new to Reiki to help them awaken. And it's help Reiki practitioners come back to, let's reawaken all of this power, this energy, and own it for me and learn these techniques. So it's a 14-day email series with little short videos, like 1 to 5 minutes short videos. It also includes guided meditations, and it includes journal prompts and manifesting tips. And it's beautiful. And I've basically spent many years kind of like honing in like the best of the best of the best. And this is the product of that. And you can get it. You can join for just $11.11. If you don't want to do the email series, do the challenge anyway. Come over to Reiki Cafe Community in our Facebook group and going, I'm on day 1, I'm on day 5, whatever it is, and tell us how it's going for you. If you want all of the tips and tricks, if you want to be part of the program, part of the group, I highly recommend joining the Reiki Reawakening series, because it's hot, it's affordable, it's a good investment, and it's really going to help you find your own path to your intuition. Anything you want to add?
Accountable for your self-Reiki, because that's something that I think we all need, right? There's a reason that community is a value of Reiki Cafe University. There's a reason that we are so passionate about connecting Reiki practitioners with each other, because when we have a community, when we have connections, when we have people looking out for us, then our practice can thrive, because we're holding each other up and we're encouraging each other and we're keeping each other accountable. So like Christine said, it is 14 days of tips, tricks, Reiki inspiration, self-Reiki ideas, fun little offers and quotes, and just so many amazing things in this email series. And it's an excellent way if you've been looking to reconnect with Reiki, if you've been looking to jumpstart your self-Reiki practice, if you've been looking to engage with the community again, this is a fantastic way to do it. So you can click the link, you can join, then you can join the Facebook group, and you can join us for this 14-day Reiki Reawakening, because it truly is an amazing experience.
We would love to have you. So thank you guys all so much for joining us today. I hope you got a lot of inspiration and insights, and I would love to know how your intuition is developing for you and how you are coming to this centered place in your own practice. Feel free to share over at Reiki Cafe community. Let us know in the comments below. And thank you all so much for tuning in and being here with us today.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful